Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It happened on a Thursday night, under the cheap neon lights of an office bar that tried too hard to feel expensive. She laughed louder than usual, her hand resting on his shoulder like she'd forgotten who was watching. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. I didn't belong to that world of bright smiles and casual touches. I was there because she'd asked me to come, to show support, as she said. The drink in my hand stayed untouched. She looked at me across the room, eyes half challenging, half daring, and then turned back to him, her creative director, and said something that made the table burst out laughing. His hand brushed against hers again, and this time she didn't move it away. That's when she looked back at me. A wink. Just one. Small enough for others to miss, deliberate enough for me not to. Later, in the parking lot, she said it like it was nothing. Flirting isn't cheating, Mark. You take everything too seriously. I didn't argue. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her reflection in the window of my Ford F-150. Her makeup smudged slightly under the glow of the streetlight. For the first time, I realized how easily she crossed lines, how it wasn't about mistakes, but about experiments. She wanted to see what she could get away with. That night, she went to bed scrolling through her phone, a Starbucks cup still half full on her nightstand, laughing softly at messages that weren't mine. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft buzz of the refrigerator the only sound. My laptop screen glowed in the dark as I watched her Instagram stories loop endlessly. Her smile, his shadow, her laughter. I thought about the systems I built at work: firewalls, breach alerts, intrusion logs. I could trace every unauthorized access in seconds. But what kind of system do you build when the threat comes from the person you share a bed with? At 2 a.m., she stirred, mumbled something about how I was too quiet lately. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and looked at her one more time. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. In the morning, she woke up to an empty kitchen. I'd already left for work. She texted, "Coffee later?" I saw the notification flash on my iPhone screen and didn't reply. By the time she posted another story, her smiling in the office mirror, same man in the background, I'd already made my decision. I wouldn't confront her. I'd just start removing myself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for her to test. She thought flirting wasn't cheating. I knew silence wasn't staying. The first real crack came a week later. I didn't go looking for it. It found me. One of her coworkers, Sam, a quiet guy from accounting, stopped by my office downtown. He said he'd run into Emma and the team at a rooftop bar after a client pitch. His voice hesitated on the word team. Then he said something that stuck. "Man, your wife really knows how to work a crowd." That night, I checked her location out of habit. Downtown. Same place again. It wasn't jealousy. It was data. I watched the pin hover there for 2 hours, then moved to a different block, the one where her creative director lived. The logic was simple. If you trust the system, you can see the pattern. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I sat in my car outside a closed Walmart parking lot, sipping cold coffee from the cup holder, the glow of her Instagram story flashing across my phone. She was laughing again, that same easy laugh, wearing the red dress she'd said was too much for a work event. He was in the background again, always just blurred enough to deny. When she came home past midnight, she smelled like perfume and rooftop air. She said, "You're still up?" as if nothing had shifted. I nodded. She didn't see it. The distance already built itself between us. Not in miles, but in silence. Over the next few days, I stopped reacting. She noticed, but pretended not to. She tried jokes at dinner, posted more selfies, tagged more locations. Every move of hers felt like bait, every caption a test. "Living my best life," one said, with a smile that wasn't meant for me. At work, my screens were filled with code, but her face kept showing up between the lines. I handled network breaches for companies across states. Yet somehow, the breach closest to me went unpatched. There's a moment when you realize control isn't about confrontation. It's about withdrawal. Friday came. She was heading to another team outing. Same red dress, same perfume. She caught her reflection in the mirror and asked, "Does this look too much?" I said nothing. That silence hit her harder than any accusation could. She turned, half smiling, half uneasy. When the door closed behind her, I opened my laptop one last time. Deleted our shared calendars, logged out of her social accounts, disconnected the devices she'd synced to mine. No trace, no warning. I wasn't erasing her. I was reclaiming me. That night, I didn't check her location. For the first time, I didn't need to know where she was, because I'd already started disappearing from where she expected me to be. Proof doesn't always come as a confession. Sometimes, it comes as metadata. I wasn't searching for it, but my instincts as a cybersecurity engineer didn't sleep. One night, she left her iPhone charging on the kitchen counter while she showered. A notification lit up the screen, Slack. A message preview from him. Still thinking about last night. Just 6 words, but they rewired everything. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. In my world, a trace is enough. I'd seen too many digital fingerprints to doubt what they mean. She came out in her robe, humming, scrolling through Amazon for something new to wear to the next client dinner. Her reflection caught mine in the window, but she didn't notice my face had changed. She couldn't see the moment the switch flipped, the exact second I stopped reacting. That night, while she slept, I connected my laptop to our shared Wi-Fi and watched the activity log. The messages, the shared files, the sudden bursts of late-night data between her phone and an unknown IP. It wasn't about reading her words. It was about the pattern. Predictable, timed, consistent. Just like any other breach. Except this one had my last name attached to it. By morning, I'd stopped being angry. Anger requires energy, and I wasn't giving her that anymore. I brewed coffee, left hers on the counter, and drove to work in silence. My Ford F-150 moved through the city like it was just another system. Engine, traffic, timing. Everything made sense except her. At lunch, my coworker asked if everything was okay. I said, "Yeah, just thinking." That was true. I was already planning my exit. Not the emotional kind, but the operational one. I knew how to disappear cleanly. How to leave no trace. That evening, she came home late again. Her laughter filled the hall before she even opened the door. She told me they'd gotten a new client, that everyone had gone out to celebrate. I nodded, smiled, and said nothing. She didn't realize silence can be the loudest answer. When she went to shower, I checked the photo she'd just posted. Same red dress. Same man in the reflection behind her. Different caption this time. Magic happens when you're fearless. She thought she was untouchable. But the truth is, she'd already lost something she couldn't post about, my attention. And when a man like me stops monitoring, he's already gone. It happened after the company's spring party. She'd been preparing for it all week. New dress, new perfume, another reason to stay late at the office. I didn't ask questions. I just watched the routine unfold like a script I already knew the ending to. She said it was just networking, but when she left, the silence that followed felt heavier than usual. I sat at the kitchen table, the dim light bouncing off her untouched coffee from Starbucks that morning, and I realized something simple. She no longer feared losing me. Hours passed. I didn't check her location this time. I didn't need to. The distance was already measurable without GPS. Around midnight, I heard the faint ping of her laughter through a live video on one of her co-workers' Instagram stories. She was dancing, carefree, holding a drink, her hand on his arm. Not hiding anymore. The caption read, "When the boss says work hard, play harder." I didn't feel pain, just a deep stillness. The kind that comes when you've reached the point of no return. At 1 a.m., I opened the shared calendar, deleted my upcoming appointments, and started a new folder on my laptop labeled Reset. Inside, I dropped copies of my work files, tax records, and travel documents. Not revenge, just logistics. When you design systems for a living, you know how to disappear without leaving a crash log. By the time she stumbled through the door, heels in hand, mascara slightly smudged, I was already in bed pretending to sleep. She whispered something about how everyone had fun, and that I should have come. I didn't move. She waited for a reaction that never came. Eventually, she sighed and turned away. That sigh told me more than words ever could. It wasn't guilt, it was disappointment that her performance didn't get an audience. At dawn, I was gone. No shouting, no accusations, no notes, just absence. I took the essentials, my laptop, a few clothes, and drove out of the city in my Ford F-150. By sunrise, the skyline was behind me, and I felt something I hadn't in months, clarity. When she woke up, she'd find the bed cold, the apartment quiet, and on the table, just one thing, my office badge and a note that said, You wanted attention. Now you have it, from everyone but me. Then I turned off my phone, erased my accounts, and kept driving. For the first time, silence wasn't empty. It was freedom. The world didn't end when I left. It just got quieter. I drove west with no destination, letting the highway decide. The air felt clean, untouched by her perfume or the sound of her laughter. I stopped at a Waffle House off the interstate, ordered black coffee, and watched strangers pass by. None of them knew that somewhere in another city, a woman was waking up to an empty apartment and the echo of her own games. By noon, the messages started coming in. Missed calls, texts, then voicemails. Mark, where are you? Can we talk? You're overreacting. Her voice trembled more with each one, shifting from irritation to panic. I didn't listen to all of them. I just let the phone light up on the passenger seat while I drove. Silence was the only answer I had left, and it was doing the work for me. Later that day, I checked my email, a message from a recruiter I'd spoken to months ago. Tesla. Remote cybersecurity contract, high pay, relocation optional. It felt less like coincidence and more like timing aligning itself. By the next morning, I'd accepted. A new city, a new system to protect, far from the one that had already collapsed. Meanwhile, mutual friends started reaching out. Small things at first. Hey, Emma seems worried. She's been asking around. I didn't respond. She'd spent years mastering control through charm, attention, and noise. Now, she was fighting an opponent she couldn't manipulate, silence. Through LinkedIn updates and mutual contacts, I saw fragments of her unraveling. Missed workdays. Tense office energy. Her creative director suddenly less visible in group photos. The same people who once laughed at their chemistry now whispered about her choices. Reputation spreads faster than truth. That night, I sat in a small motel room outside Austin, my laptop glowing on the desk. I didn't dig for revenge, but I couldn't help noticing a small anomaly on a public company server, something tied to her department's project files. An exposed credential, maybe intentional, maybe not. I drafted a short anonymous report and sent it to compliance. No names, no fingerprints, just truth in data form. By morning, I'd erased the email, cleared my history, and looked out the window as the sun rose over a city that didn't know my story. She had built her power on visibility. I built mine on absence. And in that stillness, she finally started to lose what she'd always taken for granted: control. News travels fast in small circles, even in big cities. A week after I started at Tesla, I heard through an old co-worker that things at her agency had gotten messy. The creative director, her partner in harmless fun, was suddenly under investigation for misconduct. An anonymous tip had exposed some questionable expense reports tied to their client accounts. No one could trace where it came from. They didn't need to. The truth had its own way of surfacing. I didn't smile. I didn't feel proud. It wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. I built systems for a living. I understood what happens when you play too long outside the firewall. Eventually, the system resets itself. She was learning that in real time. Days later, her name appeared online. Small mentions, subtle gossip. Her coworkers stopped tagging her in team photos. A mutual friend messaged me saying she'd been quiet lately, not showing up to work events, barely posting. That told me everything. She'd spent years thriving on attention, and now the silence she once mocked was closing in on her. I saw her text come through one evening while I sat in a small diner near my motel. I know you don't owe me anything, but can we talk? The message stayed unread. I set the phone down, finished my burger, and looked out the window. I wasn't avoiding her. I just wasn't available anymore. There's a difference. Around midnight, she posted for the first time in days a photo of her coffee on a Target table, captioned, "Trying to rebuild. One day at a time." I knew what that meant. She wanted to be seen, to look like she was healing. But the look in her eyes, even through the screen, said something else. It said she was starting to understand what silence can do. I didn't like seeing her fall. I didn't hate it either. What I felt was colder, cleaner, a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop trying to fix something that was designed to break. The next morning, I deleted her number for good. Not blocked, not ignored. Deleted. I drove to work, past the security gate, and realized the strange truth. I hadn't escaped her. I'd escaped the version of myself that once needed her approval to feel whole. And somewhere back in that city, She was just beginning to understand what it means when a man like me stops showing up. Months passed before she found my new number. It came from a mutual friend who didn't know better. I saw her name flash across my phone while I sat in the parking lot outside work, the Texas sun fading behind the Tesla plant. For a moment, I just watched the screen light up, remembering how her voice once filled every quiet space. Then I turned it face down and let it ring. She called again 2 days later. Then again. The voicemails started to pile up, her tone shifting with each one. First came the casual apology, the kind meant to smooth things over. Then came confusion. Then desperation. She said she just wanted to understand what happened. But she knew. The moment she'd said flirting wasn't cheating, she'd drawn her own map to the end. I just followed it to the exit. One night, after a late shift, I finally listened to one of the messages. Her voice cracked halfway through. She said she couldn't sleep, that she keeps checking locations like it changes something. That line stayed with me. She used to check my messages, my tone, my silence. Now she was checking my location like it could bring her peace. She was learning that access doesn't equal connection. At work, I moved through projects like a machine. Efficiency became a shield. People liked my calm, my control. They didn't see that silence wasn't just my mood. It was my method. The world outside noise is quiet, but sharp. It teaches you how much power exists in what you don't say. Occasionally, I'd scroll through her social feed, more out of curiosity than attachment. The change was visible. Softer lighting. Fewer smiles. The captions had lost their brightness. No more living my best life. Just lines about growth and rebuilding. Her audience still liked the photos, but I could tell they felt the shift too. She'd become transparent in a way that filters couldn't hide. One night, she posted a photo of the skyline. The caption read, "Some mistakes are too loud to live with." It didn't feel like bait. It felt like truth. I didn't react. I just put the phone away and sat in silence, letting that sentence settle. For the first time, I realized she wasn't chasing validation anymore. She was chasing something quieter, something I'd found the moment I stopped speaking. And in that moment, I knew the power had completely shifted. She was finally the one waiting for a response that would never come. The first time I saw her again, it wasn't planned. I was at a small coffee shop outside Austin, waiting for my order when I heard her voice behind me. I hadn't heard it in months, yet it hit like a memory that refused to fade. I turned, slowly, and there she was, Emma. Same face, different presence. The brightness that once drew every eye in the room was gone. What stood there was quieter, heavier, human. She froze when she saw me. The silence stretched between us, thick enough to taste. Then she said my name like it was foreign, something she had to practice before saying out loud. She looked tired, not in a physical way, but like someone who hadn't rested in a long time. She said she was in town for a client meeting, that things at the agency had changed a lot. Her words stumbled, searching for footing that wasn't there. I nodded, calm. No anger, no warmth, just balance. She asked if we could sit, so we did. The air between us was fragile, full of all the things she once ignored. She said she missed me, said she hadn't realized how far she'd gone until there was no one left to turn to. She talked about therapy, about accountability, about how she'd grown. I listened, but my silence wasn't forgiveness, it was observation. For years, she'd spoken in a language of charm and control, always performing. But now, her sentences trembled. There was no show left to put on. She told me she'd lost most of her clients, that the creative director had left the company, and that her reputation was still recovering. She laughed softly when she said, "Guess karma doesn't need an audience." When the drinks came, I took mine black, the way I always had. She hesitated before sipping hers, still ordering the same caramel latte from Starbucks. Some habits die slowly. She asked if I ever thought about coming back, not to her, but to us. The word hung there, heavy and hollow. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She saw it in my eyes. The distance wasn't anger anymore. It was finality. As I stood to leave, she whispered, "I still check your location sometimes. I don't even know why." I paused for a moment, not looking back. Silence had been my weapon once. Now it was just my peace. I walked out without a word, leaving her sitting there, alone in a cafe full of noise that suddenly felt too quiet. After that day at the cafe, she tried again. Messages, emails, even handwritten letters. Each one softer than the last. Not the old manipulative tone, but something quieter, broken. She said she wasn't asking for a second chance, just closure. But closure is a story people tell themselves when they can't handle silence. I never replied. Some stories are better unfinished. Through mutual friends, I heard fragments of her life unraveling further. She'd left the agency, started freelancing. The creative director had vanished from the scene completely, and rumors filled the void he left behind. The world she'd built on charm and attention had collapsed quietly, without scandal, without noise. That's how real endings happen, slowly, until no one notices they already occurred. She'd post occasionally short captions about self-growth, about healing, about moving forward. But every photo felt staged, every smile slightly off-frame. One night, she uploaded a picture of a candle burning on a table from Target, with the caption, "Sometimes the quiet is too loud." The comments were filled with support, but I could see through it. That line wasn't for her followers, it was for me. I didn't like seeing her struggle, but I didn't reach out either. She was learning what silence costs. I'd learned that lesson long before her. Weeks later, I got an email from her address. No subject, just a few lines. She wrote, "I understand now. You didn't leave to hurt me. You left to save yourself. I used to think silence was punishment. Now I see it's mercy." That was the last message she ever sent. I sat there for a long time, rereading it, not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed what I already knew. Sometimes people need to lose the signal before they understand the connection. I didn't reply. I just closed the email and went back to my work. The sound of typing filled the room like rain on glass, steady, distant, clean. I'd stopped looking back months ago, but in that moment, I realized she had finally caught up to where I'd been all along. The place beyond noise, beyond reaction. She once said flirting wasn't cheating. I'd said silence wasn't staying. Now, she understood both. And for the first time, the silence between us didn't feel like war. It felt like truth. I saw her one last time, almost a year after I'd left. It wasn't planned. I was at an industry conference in Chicago, walking out of a Tesla panel when I heard someone say my name. Her voice had changed, lower, slower, stripped of the confidence that used to fill every room. I turned, and there she was. No designer dress, no rehearsed smile. Just Emma. Real, raw, and quiet. She said she hadn't expected to see me there. I told her I hadn't expected to see her anywhere. She smiled at that, not out of humor, but relief. Like she'd been waiting for a sign that I still existed beyond her memories. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by people who didn't know our story, the noise of conversation fading behind us. She said life had been different. She was working freelance now, teaching part-time at a small college, helping young marketers avoid her mistakes. There was no bitterness in her voice, just acceptance. She said she'd learned that sometimes losing everything isn't punishment, it's instruction. I nodded. I didn't need to say anything else. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said, "You were right. Flirting wasn't harmless." It was the first lie I told myself. Her eyes were steady when she said it. No tears, no performance, just truth. She took a breath and added, "And silence wasn't staying." It was the loudest goodbye I've ever heard. For the first time in a long time, I saw clarity in her. She wasn't trying to win. She wasn't trying to fix. She was just standing there, owning the wreckage. I respected that. I told her I was glad she found her way. She smiled, small but real, and said, "You look different, lighter." I said, "I am." And it was true. When I walked away, I didn't feel the weight of what we'd been. I felt distance, but not emptiness. She'd finally learned what I had understood the night I left, that silence isn't absence. It's a reset. Later, in my hotel room, I thought about how strange it was that peace doesn't always come from closure. Sometimes it comes from walking away and never explaining why. She had crossed the line with a wink. I had answered without a word. And in the end, it wasn't revenge or loss or regret that defined us. It was the quiet understanding that not all endings need to echo to be heard. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.